that you saw in that vlog was me about to get my nails done. I did get them done in the end. Now onto my reflections. So I actually went back and watched my video from my first year as an AP, just to see what I spoke about in that video, to see what themes were brought up, and to also think about the areas that I highlighted for my own development, to see whether I completed that within the time between that video and this video. In that last video, I spoke about how I kind of know what I'm doing, but I also kind of don't, which is still me. And actually one thing that I've realised as an assistant psychologist is that in this field, nobody knows exactly what they're doing, because every person that we work with, every service that we work in, are all very different. And so I don't think anyone can certainly say, like, here's what you should do, here's the right way to do it. And I think part of being a psychologist is actually being okay with that, but then knowing where to go for help, knowing where to go to gain that knowledge. And I think that is really key, especially when you're going on to training, because as it implies, you're going on training, you're not going to be a qualified clinical psychologist straight away, so you need to be okay with not knowing all the answers. You need to be, you know, humble enough to know that you will get things wrong, but then to get back up again and to figure out how to do it better, or in the correct way. In the last video, I also spoke a lot about confidence and how that was kind of my main takeaway maybe from that video, because it kept cropping up. Just having confidence in working with clients, having confidence in the work setting, and in all of the things that I do admin wise and clinical work. And actually I have gained so much confidence, but unfortunately that confidence came when I gained a place on training. Most of the seniors in my team, including my supervisors, pointed out that as soon as I found out that I got a place on training, that I spoke maybe with more authority, I was more confident in the workplace, I came into supervision with more questions. And it's just such a shame that that confidence had to come from the external affirmation from the course, because I guess as soon as I found out that I was going to be a trainee clinical psychologist, I was like, wow, like maybe I am actually good enough for this profession, and maybe my voice does matter. I probably could have got a lot more out of my assistant post if I had confidence in my own abilities and skills. That is probably part of how I grew as a person. And I guess what I want people to maybe take away from this video is to try and learn from the things that maybe took me a bit longer to learn. But then I feel like confidence does just come with time, doesn't it? So part of me is like, it happened in the way that it was meant to happen. When I finished my post, I finished at 1 year and 8 months. And so in terms of clinical skills, I began to use different psychological models to formulate and to complete interventions with clients. So I spoke about CBT and narrative in the last video, but actually my knowledge on how to use CBT, how to formulate, really grew in those months after that video. In the same way with narratives. Now the work that I was doing with the narrative model was mainly the tree of life, but also thinking about alternative storylines, and that came really into play within different parts of work where maybe the focus wasn't completely narrative, but I would draw on some of those techniques, which were really helpful. And I think that's also one of the things that I learned towards the end, was the ability to pull from different models. And that's one of the great things about being a clinical psychologist, is that we are trained in various models, and so we can pull from different theories, from different styles of formulation, different techniques, in order to fit the client's needs, rather than trying to do it the other way around, where we know only one kind of model and then the client has to fit that. So that's one thing I really did learn, was how to use these models flexibly. Towards the end of my time as an AP, I started to use acceptance and commitment therapy, which I really enjoyed, and I learnt that through my supervisor, but also from a book by Russ Harris, I believe, but I'll leave that over here somewhere, and I'll leave it linked down below. But that was really helpful as well, and I really enjoyed using ACT, especially within a stroke service. I think ACT is really helpful with maybe chronic conditions, so chronic health conditions, chronic pain, brain injury and things like that, because unfortunately we can't fix their problems. That's just not how it works, and so the acceptance part really is helpful for these situations and these people. I also really enjoyed the use of metaphors. That's just kind of like the person I am. I love a good metaphor, and so to be able to incorporate that into therapy was quite interesting for me. So I enjoyed that, and I also enjoyed formulating using the ACT matrix. So I thought for me that was quite easy to conceptualize. At first I did really struggle to dive into ACT because it's not as structured, I guess, as CBT, and so I kind of was trying to conceptualize the ACT hexaflex, and it just wasn't happening for me. And so when you really like strip it down to the basics of just using the ACT matrix, where you think about the person's values, how they're moving away, how they're moving towards, and all of that, it was a lot easier for me to understand. And so I think another thing that I learned is to just kind of, if there's something that I don't understand, then to really strip it down into basics and put it into my own words, my own understanding, which is really going to come into handy when I'm on training. In terms of the memory service, I learned a lot more about the different kinds of dementia. So we spent a lot of time thinking about Lewy body dementia and that presentation, also vascular dementia, also Parkinson's dementia, also Alzheimer's, but thinking about how that would present during a neuropsych assessment. So really focusing in on the different subtests and people's reports of any symptoms that they might be experiencing. The way my post was split, I wasn't able to attend a lot of the diagnostic meetings for the dementia service, but towards the end of my time as an AP, I was able to swap some days around so I could sit in on those meetings, which was so helpful. And again, I wish I did this earlier on in order to understand how psychology functions within a wider MDT, especially when working alongside a more medical model, because our team is comprised of psychiatrists as well. It was quite interesting to hear these discussions and viewpoints as to why someone might be diagnosed with a certain kind of dementia or maybe mild cognitive impairment. And so it really showed me that we really do need to be confident, I guess, in our own understanding of how dementia presents in people, especially within the assessment room. But it was quite interesting to see my supervisor interact with the psychiatrist to see how they navigate maybe different views on how dementia might present, different course of treatment. The way they understand dementia as a whole was quite interesting to hear those discussions, so I really appreciated that. In terms of neuropsych testing and report writing, I have gotten so much better at that. I've done quite a few return to work assessments and I've learned a lot from those, because there is a difference between doing a diagnostic neuropsychological assessment versus a neuropsychological assessment that wants to focus in on someone's strengths and maybe the areas that they need more support in terms of their cognitive profile. So it was quite interesting to do both and see how they differ in the way that you actually complete the assessment. It kind of made me realise that, okay, yeah, stats is actually quite important, because when you're thinking about the different percentiles and thinking about where people sit in the different ranges, like, it is quite important to have that basic understanding of stats. Another thing that I have massively improved upon are my formulation skills, and that it's still something that I'm learning and still something that I'm not 100% on, which I know, and that's probably very common. But I have gotten a lot better, and I've gotten better at sharing my formulation supervision and also understanding what to look out for during the assessment. So during the initial assessment, that's where you're really kind of piecing together the bits of information to form the basis of your formulation. And your formulation will adapt and grow and change as you work with the client. However, I have learnt to pick up on certain things during the assessment where I think, like maybe we need to explore this a bit further, this would aid the formulation. And so I think that, again, it will improve over time, but I think I've done quite well in picking that up over the past year and 8 months. Another thing that I have, I guess, experienced, maybe not improved upon, but learning how to sit in reflective spaces with my colleagues. So in my service, we have a reflective space about every 6 weeks. We speak about racism and basically aiding our thoughts into how we can make psychology more anti-racist. Those can be very difficult spaces to sit in, especially because, you know, you've got people from different backgrounds. I've become maybe not comfortable, but I know now the benefits of it, the importance of it. Also understanding the need for it in psychology, especially during this time, especially if people on courses want to live up to the fact that they're all anti-racist and they all want to promote diversity. And thinking about the clinical psychologist that I want to be, I found these spaces so helpful, and my supervisors did this so well. I learned a lot from my supervisors, especially in the latter part of my time as an AP, because of my focus on starting training. And so I was really observing them and learning about good leadership. You know, I think for me, part of being a good leader is, you know, checking in on your team, understanding what's best for them, which might not be easy or might not be the most comfortable, but also setting up some time to, you know, on a human level, check in with everyone and create that team spirit. So like going out for coffee in the afternoons or something, or bringing cake in, and really fostering that, but also checking in on people's needs in terms of learning. And basically what I saw from my supervisors and the leads was that they were just very good at serving others. And so yes, while they are leading the team, they are also helping other people get along, and if they notice someone was struggling, they would pick them up and say, okay, how are we going to fix this together? For some reason, when you imagine a leader, you don't think of someone serving. And when I say serving, it's just like just being very open to help, and that I think encourages other people to help the leaders create the best team. As I progressed as an AP, I was able to work with a wide variety of different clients, but more specifically clients who had maybe a more complex experience at the time. I was more able to support them, and my supervisors gave me more trust, I guess, and they would work very closely with me. But I have noticed the big change in the types of clients that I used to see right at the beginning in comparison to now, and I think that just shows how much I've grown as a clinician, and also the fact that I just know how to escalate things when there's a need to do so. And also when working with these clients who have more complex situations, being able to signpost to different services, being able to contact other services. So by the time that I had finished my AP post, I had a long list of different services where I could turn to if I knew my client needed some specific support for, I don't know, like gambling or addiction. So sometimes when we see clients, they are dealing with loads of different things at the time, and building your knowledge on the other services that can help support is really important as a psychologist. It's really important when thinking about, you know, discharging people at the end, because sometimes you will have to kind of step down the care rather than just discharging them with nowhere to go to afterwards. That's another thing that I've learned actually about endings. Obviously with my post coming to an end, I had to go through a lot of endings with clients, and I spent some time in supervision thinking about endings and the importance of, you know, having a good ending, how to set people up for the best ending, how to know when to end things. And we had some really informative discussions. And thinking about what a good ending looks like, me and my supervisor spoke about how a good ending doesn't mean that the person is no longer experiencing any symptoms of low mood or anxiety. It might mean that they are at the best that they can be and that they're coping, which was quite difficult for me to get my head around, because sometimes you will finish a bit of work with someone and think, like their outcome measures aren't as changed as I would hope, or they're still experiencing anxiety. And actually sometimes that will happen, and your job is just to get them to the point where they have reached their therapeutic goal, where things are better or that they're coping better with the anxiety. So even if they're still feeling anxious, that they can still go out and do the things that they want to do and still lead a meaningful life. But also with that comes difficulty in discharging people, because sometimes people don't want to be discharged because we are a safe space, we are a regular space, we are consistent, and sometimes when that's taken away from someone, or when that's stopped, that can be really hard. And it is hard to discharge someone who maybe doesn't want to be discharged, and so having to be that reassuring voice to be able to pick up on those situations where they have done things independently without us there, and to recap the amount of progress that they've made over the time that you've been working with them is really key in a smooth discharge. And moving on to how my time as an AP has changed me as a person, because I think that's quite important when thinking about us as psychologists, the people that we speak to, the people that we work with people for months on end, and so to think that their experiences won't change us and the experiences that we have at work won't change us, I think is a bit ludicrous, to be honest, because everything that we experience in the world will mould us for better or worse, and we need to be aware of that as psychologists. So the first thing is about dealing with client death, and this is something that I really still struggle with, and it kind of gets me a bit, you know, flustered now. But yeah, unfortunately, a couple of my clients have passed away from nothing traumatic in that way. They just passed away due to other things. But that is difficult. It's so different with each client. So some clients you may know really well and then they pass away. Some clients you might not know that much and then they pass away. Just out of the context of professional life, if someone you know distantly passes away, it does kind of remind you of your own mortality, I think, and maybe that's what hits home. And maybe when you can see someone that you know reflect in that person's personality, or there are just reminders of other people maybe in the clients that we work with, and so when those people pass away, it can be quite difficult maybe to manage, but also understanding how to support their families. And so while the families might not have been referred to us, we still need to provide some kind of support for them, and that can be really, really hard, because nothing we say or do is going to make that situation better. But what we can do is have a space for that family or friend, just to have this space to be. They use it however they want. And I don't know if dealing with client death will get any easier, because every death will be very different. But I think I had to come home and realise that, yeah, on these days where they are a bit more difficult, I need to focus on my own self-care. I need to practice what I preach. And so I think that has really prepared me for training where things will get tough, and so to give myself some time if I can, even if it is 5 minutes, to just de-stress and practice some self-care. And I guess kind of leading on from this is not so personal, but thinking about boundaries and setting boundaries with clients, which I touched on in my last video about how terrible I am or how uncomfortable I feel when having to say no to clients when they ask certain questions. And I have gotten so much better at this, and I understand now that actually it's really beneficial for them to maybe question at times why they want to know certain information about me, but also to understand that with some clients and in some situations it can be helpful. In terms of boundaries, I have just become more comfortable in saying no and actually asking them, okay, what would that, why are you interested in knowing that about me, or what would it mean for me to answer that question for you, before even disclosing anything. But for the most part I don't, and I just explain that actually this is a professional relationship and that it wouldn't be that helpful for me to disclose that information in this environment. This is something that I definitely have gotten better at, still need to feel more comfortable with it, but I think while on training that is something I do want to focus in on, is hearing about different people's point of views on how they deal with those situations, because I think hearing about how other psychologists approach questions that are more personal and how they maybe deflect them or how they engage with those questions will be very beneficial in my growth. And I guess leading on from that point is about self-disclosure. And thinking about self-disclosure, we can't ignore the fact that I am very much online. As you probably have noticed, I no longer do as many vlogs, which I miss them so much. But for me, in this current moment, I don't know how comfortable I feel with putting myself out there in that way. Whenever I upload a video, I always think, if one of my clients saw this, would they be happy with it? Would I be comfortable with them seeing it? And for a long time, I was very comfortable with clients seeing my vlogs, because you don't see much of my life. I'm never inappropriate online, and so yeah, I didn't feel uncomfortable with it. And I still don't, and those videos are still up on YouTube. However, I have had this slight change in what people know about me online and how I may be perceived, and especially as I'm now going to be a trainee clinical psychologist where I will be moving around different services, so therefore the chances of a client seeing my stuff on YouTube is quite high. I did just want to be a bit more careful about that, and so now I really think about whether I'm happy with this stuff going out on YouTube and on Instagram, and that's why a lot of my stuff now is going to become more psychology focused. This is something that will change over time. I don't know if it will stay the same while on training, but we'll see, and that's just something that I have learned, that it is okay to change your willingness to share online. I don't think there's one right way to do it. I think everyone's figuring it out as psychologists living in this technology heavy world. So in terms of areas for development, everything that I've mentioned in this video I will still be working on, because as a psychologist we are always evolving and always growing. There's new research coming out and I'll be going on training, so a lot of the things that I have learned I will probably have to, you know, develop. But I still haven't done any group therapy work because of COVID, so that's one thing that I still am going to have to work on and really push for while I'm training. I also want to work on sharing my views in a big group, because sometimes I feel like my views, my ideas aren't valid, and that again comes back down to the confidence thing. But I'm trying to set myself a goal of like having to speak in every like group session, so that like group colleague session, you know, maybe like reflective spaces and whatnot, because I think it is very beneficial to, you know, get my confidence up in that way, because I do have things to say. I need to get better at self-care, especially while I'm training, and thinking about how I can be more boundaried with my work, because it's going to be intense on training and I get that, and so I just need to be very aware of how I can maneuver myself through the 3 years and how I can look after myself during that time. And I really want to get better at understanding how to score neuropsych assessments, because sometimes that can take a very long time, but also research, because I haven't done research in so long and I haven't done any audits or anything as of recently, so I do need to get back on that bandwagon. So there's a lot of things for me to work on, and I think that's completely normal as a psychologist, and that's okay. And that's one thing that I am really happy to now have drilled into my head, and that is that nobody knows what's going on entirely, nobody is entirely correct, and that is absolutely fine, so long as you're also aware that you also have those weak spots. And another thing that I've learned is how to work with clients remotely with COVID. Woohoo! Doing remote work has been very interesting, and actually the majority of my clients I have seen online or over the phone, which is crazy, but such a fun experience to figure out how to share resources with them, trying to figure out how to keep people's attention while doing it over the phone, having to, you know, teach people how to use this technology and get them set up. Also trying to understand how to create that therapeutic relationship and build that rapport with people online. And something that my supervisor has drilled into me is the fact that rapport is literally the most important thing of the work that we do. And how do you do that over the phone when you've never seen someone before? How to do that over video where you don't have that, I don't know, there's something different. Is it energy? Is it just the fact that you're no longer 3D? I don't know, but it just is very different. So how do you make people feel at ease while you're on the internet with them? And I feel so privileged to have been able to work in this way, but to also have been there for that transitional period and to really work alongside wider teams and attend so many different webinars on how to conduct assessments online and then make sure they're still valid and reliable. It's been a period of change and learning in terms of that, and with that comes, you know, knowledge that I can adapt very quickly. I mean, we were seeing people face to face 1 week, and then 2 weeks later we were doing assessments over video call. So I know that I can adapt to any situation. So actually I have got some confidence in myself from that scenario. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching my last ever video as an assistant psychologist, and just thank you so much for sticking around. I know some of you guys have been here from the very beginning, from that first assistant psychologist interview video, and I'm just so grateful to have you here along for the ride. Your support means the world, and the messages that you guys send me about how you now are on AP posts as well gets me so excited. I literally have them saved all on my phone, so if I'm having a really crap day I literally sit there and read through all of your lovely messages. So thank you so much for sticking around, and I hope you're enjoying your AP posts if you're still in them. Please give this a like if you liked it and subscribe for more content like this. And until next time guys, when I'm a trainee clinical psychologist, I will see you later. Bye!